Thank you. Thank you to all. No problem. I appreciate everybody coming on tonight. I am Heidi King with College Inside Track. And if you're on tonight, it's probably because you have somebody in the near future who is involved with college process. So tonight we're going to do a lovely deep dive into the overall view and really how to do a more strategic college search in what has been a strange couple of years and for sure a changing landscape. So I would like to introduce you guys to my moderator, Sonia. And we have many questions that were actually submitted ahead of time, which is great. We'll have an opportunity to answer those. If you have any questions that you come up with, in the meantime, please feel free to go ahead and put those in the chat. Sonia is the best person to go ahead and push those out to, because I will take an opportunity to stop, and then she'll let me know what the questions are, and that way I can focus on presenting and not necessarily monitoring the chat. But again, her name is Sonia, and we're happy to go ahead and kind of review any of those for you. And let me go ahead and pull up my presentation now. So again, tonight we're going to have a wonderful hour, about just a little over 55 minutes, to talk about navigating a strategic college search in what is a changing landscape. My name is Heidi King. I am with a company called College Inside Track. College Inside Track has been around for the better part of 16 years. And our goal when we work with families is to always help them find the right academic fit, the right social fit, and the right financial fit for their families. And if you have a student who's going through this right now, I know it is stressful because I am the parent of two that are in college right now. So I know how hard everybody is working towards this milestone event in your family's life. Our goal when we work with families is to really kind of reduce that stress. And tonight is part of our free continuing education that we provide, really helping you better understand about how to pull back the curtain on process, because so much has changed since many of us went off to school. So when we think about the college application landscape, it can really be compared to something that might have been easy for you back in the day, and that was working on your car. Because working on your car, things were pretty straightforward back 30 years ago. You could fix things because you had the tools and the knowledge to do that. But today, when things break on your car, it is really challenging. My gosh, everything is hidden behind there. It's not very transparent. You need a computer and definitely like next level education to figure out what is wrong, right? And applying to college is very relatable in that terms, especially because of the lack of transparency in the industry, especially around cost and who's getting in and accepted. It is very difficult to apply and get into the schools that you are wanting to. So let's really explore this. How can I best relate to you that it is difficult? And I think one way that we can do that for sure is to show the challenges that people are facing and the percentage of students that are transferring from the schools that they are attending, right? So go ahead, if anybody has the, we can work on that chat feature right now. What do you think the percentage of students that transferring at least one time is? Please go ahead and put that in the chat feature. If your guess is 6, 14, 25, 38% transfer rate, or a whopping, hopefully this is not the case, 50% transfer rate, right? So Sonia, if we have any of those answers, go ahead. And
We have some at 38 and some at 25, Heidi.
okay, awesome. Thanks so much, you guys, for doing that. It just gives us a little bit of warm up on how to use this chat. But it is true that the national transfer rate, somebody guessed it, 38%, right? And I have to tell you, when I first heard about that, that is stunning to me, stunning. That means 4 in 10 students are working really hard at finding that right fit school, but for some reason are making a choice where they're calling mom and dad every night or weekly, telling them that they are miserable and wanting to come home, right? And that totally pulls on my heartstrings as a mom. But there is also another reason that that matters. It matters because transferring adds a ton of money to the cost of an already expensive 4-year undergrad education. The average cost to transfer one time sits at $14,000 added to the cost of the degree. And the sad fact is, if you have transferred one time, you are actually at risk of transferring again. The cost of 2 transfers is $24,000, and nearly 45% of the kids that have transferred once transfer again. And I'll tell you why that happens. It's because, let's say freshman year didn't go very well and they need to come home. And they come home and let's say they reboot at a community college for sophomore year. And then they decide, I'd like to try 4-year university again. So they go off to a school. But here's what. At risk, the friendships have already been formed. So they're coming in as a junior. So it's really, really difficult to actually find your friends and your people as juniors if everybody else is typically a freshman, right? So, but we come up with these numbers for several reasons. It's because typically, if you're not doing well in the classes, those classes may not all transfer, right? So that is how we come up with those numbers. Another way that we come up with that number is because traditionally, if you're taking a little bit of extra time because of a transfer, you are just not in the workforce adding and making money, earning money. So we see the cost of the transfer, but there is another reason that that matters. And it matters because this is what tuition is costing families for this year, the 2023, 2022, 23 school year. So the current year that we're in, right? So I get to meet with families virtually 5 days a week. I'm really lucky. I love my job, right? And we get to talk about the schools that are probably on their wish list, right? Quite often these are noteworthy sweatshirt kind of schools, name brand schools, right? Northwestern, honestly, $87,000 per year, right? Also, haven't met a kid yet that doesn't want to go to Boulder and experience the outdoors life, right? 1-year tuition from last year at CU Boulder, Colorado University Boulder campus, $57,000. We sit, many of us tonight from Illinois. Many of the kids that I am talking to want to go up to Madison. Some want to go down to a school in a warmer climate. Clemson is an ACC school. Those are typically $55,000. SEC schools the same. Traditionally, just out-of-state flagship schools end up costing over $50,000 for us to attend. So these are quite often the numbers that you are going to see. Now, here's the deal. Flagship college universities are public are not that flexibly priced, right? So we are going to talk about opportunities to move the needle a little bit on the cost of attendance at these schools. It is just not typically a flagship skate school that will be flexibly priced. Further on that list, I'm a graduate of the University of Illinois, right? The University of Illinois now breaks out how they're charging tuition, right? It's per degree path. is what it is referred to. So LAS at many schools will cost a different amount, a business degree, potentially a engineering degree, and for sure, like a professional pilot degree, that's going to add just more on to the cost of that tuition. Now, here in the middle, I have Dayton. And this is what I mean by talking about a flexibly priced school. Dayton is a private school. They have institutional priorities and opportunities to dip into their endowment to make tuition cheaper. So please, if there is one thing that you kind of like, the top 10 things that you take away from tonight is that going out of state to a school other than Illinois does not necessarily mean that you are going to pay outrageous sticker prices. Understand the sticker price of Dayton, $62,000, is negotiable, right? They find impactful colleges and scholarships for that college. So there's the main takeaway is that don't turn away an out-of-state school or necessarily an in-state school just because of their private school and their sticker price. For us in Illinois, we typically stay in the state of Illinois or a border state school by about 70% of us, right? So I want to talk about the opportunity for Illinois State University. The cost for that 1 year of tuition is about $32,000. College of DuPage, also a wonderful opportunity, but really any community college in our area, depending on where you live, just go to the one closest to you. Typical yearly tuition runs about $11,000. So with that slide that we were just talking about, I think we're all aware that tuition has increased to a significant amount. But what percentage do you think that tuition has increased? And we're talking about public institutions, right? So nationwide, what is the increase of the tuition as a percentage for public institutions? And go ahead and please put that in the chat feature as well. See, this is another way that things have really changed since 1990, in 30 years or whatever, is the cost and the percentage of tuition that has increased. So what do you think that is? Do you think that's 73, 106, 180, 213? Go ahead, put that in the chat.
And Heidi, we have a couple coming in at 213.
That's it. Public institutions have increased since 1990, 213%. So it is right that we are feeling the pinch as far as how much college costs these days. Public institutions, 213, private schools, higher at 415%. But let's go back to that slide when I just gave you that tip, okay? Quite typically, those private schools are more flexibly priced. And we're going to talk about ways to access their merit money a little bit further in this presentation. So again, I get to meet with families about 5 days a week. Here are some of the schools that they are talking about and the percentage increases of those specific schools. University of Illinois is up over 500%. Notre Dame, often on people's highly selective school list, up over 500. Michigan, University of Wisconsin, up over 1,000%. And not to just pick on our schools in the Midwest, UConn is up over 1,300% since 1990. So therefore, what is really important from the takeaway of the beginning of this presentation is that it is really important to find that right academic, that right social, and that right financial fit for your family. And really, when we're considering schools, build in the understanding that there is a cost of attendance and a transfer rate. And if you add those two together, it is really important to find schools with current knowledge, strategy, and sometimes support. There's nothing worse than at the end of the day, if you all apply to a list of schools And we see this right now happening, but at the end of the day, they just come in at a price point that you are not comfortable paying. So knowing a little bit about what is difficult from the schools, because they do not want to make it very transparent what they're going to cost ahead of time. But it is so important for you guys to do that research ahead of time. So does anybody have any questions? Next, we're going to talk about need-based and merit-based aid, but does anybody have any questions about the tuition or any of the colleges yet?
Heidi, could you just go recap on that screen? Is that showing tuition for 1 year or all 4 years?
Yeah, that is a good question. That is for just 1 year of school. So University of Illinois quite typically comes in somewhere about $150,000. That is our flagship state university. And I don't see that as much of a bargain, but they do. It's actually a wonderful institution, but that's exactly what it costs for 1 year, between $35,000 and $40,000.
And Heidi, is that room and board?
It is room, board, book fees, and believe it or not, in that cost of attendance, they even consider travel. So there's a bunch of ways that they come up with that number. University of Illinois does not cost us $2,000 to travel to and from, right? So yes, there can be, and health insurance, it includes fees for like health insurance. So you can, if you have health insurance through your employer, you can get that price a little bit low, but in general, those are the fees that it includes.
Okay, sounds good. We're all caught up. Thank you.
Awesome. Appreciate your questions. So one way families need help today is really figuring out how to pay for college, right? Super important milestone event. The kids have worked so hard to go to school, but it's really important that we not overpay for schools and get ourselves into debt. So let's talk about the two different types of aid, and really two different opportunities, kind of two different buckets of money. And really how you access those is very, very different, right? The first bucket of money we're going to call need-based assistance, right? That is based pretty much entirely based on mom and dad's income or what is reported on the taxes. The second bucket of money is merit-based aid, and that has nothing to do with how much money you make, right? So some families have students that can tap into both buckets of money because of their circumstances, and other families that can really only access the merit-based bucket because their income pulls them out of the need-based aid. That doesn't mean that you can't use really fantastic strategies to make college a little bit more affordable. So we're first going to talk about the need-based bucket. So in order to figure out if you're going to get need-based assistance, you have to fill out one or maybe a second form. That first one we're most familiar with is the FAFSA. The second one is a CSS profile. It is used by only about 300 schools, more highly selective schools. If you have a question about the CSS profile, I am happy to talk to you about that. But because most of us are filling out the FAFSA, we're going to focus on that tonight. Sonia will give you the opportunity to spend an hour to talk to me for free. Just ask your questions. I'm happy to go over the CSS profile or the FAFSA if you'd like that. Tonight, though, we're going to focus on that FAFSA form. Either way, either form, you input information and it comes up with a number that is being used to figure out, are you going to get federal need? That number also goes to the colleges, and then they use it themselves. In that report, you are getting what we have been used to be called a EFC number that is being changed this year to Student Aid Index. So all of a sudden, you're going to be hearing both SAI, EFC, expected family contribution is changing to Student Aid Index. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the FAFSA. The FAFSA, the season of the FAFSA is not until October. So we're going to drill down on the FAFSA a little bit more in the webinar that we're doing in September, right? But I want you to talk about it tonight because it's a super big part of college process, and there is a ton of stress over this form. Here's the deal. The form is going to be simplified, which sounds really great. It's going to go from 108 questions to about 40. But in the simplification, it is going to get, there are changes that we're going to talk about today. The FAFSA is an acronym for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. Free application for federal student aid. It is actually the application for the federal student loan. So to get that student loan, you actually have to fill out the FAFSA. And we're all in Illinois. Sometimes I do this webinar for people outside of the state and nationwide. Our state has made the FAFSA a requirement for graduation. I don't think that's a bad thing. I know that this is a form that gives people stress, but let's figure out how to make it less stressful, right? Because it gives us the opportunity for that first most favorable loan, that student loan, right? Often at the far better rates than a Parent Plus loan. The process of that FAFSA begins October 1st of the senior year in high school. And then you need to fill it out every year afterwards to figure out if you're going to get need-based at the federal government. So it's really good practice, 100%. Merit is given out in first come, first serve philosophy at colleges. So it's really important that we figure out how to get all the financial information ready for that FAFSA date. You don't have to do it on the 1st. Just think about doing it in October, right? Quite often the website runs really, really slowly around October 1st. So what is the FAFSA even used for, and why do we need to fill it out? Well, we fill it out because it's going to get us that student loan, right? 4.99% interest rate. We fill it out because it gives us access to need at the federal government. But it's really only people that have about $60,000 earned income and less that get federal assistance. So the reason why the rest of us fill this out is because there are institutional grants and scholarships that are given just for filling out the FAFSA. So getting that loan and getting any extra money in merit or scholarships is something that is just strategic, right? University of Dayton. If you fill out this form, the FAFSA, and you visit, that school will give you a $4,400 scholarship for the first year. And that's a renewable scholarship. So it's actually a 4-year gift just for filling out the FAFSA and touring. So why do we do the FAFSA? We do it because it's good process, at least your senior year, to figure out if the colleges themselves are going to give you money from an institutional perspective. Colleges get to choose that on their own. Do know that I do understand that this is a stressful process, though. That FAFSA form is no joke. It's really long, and 25% of those are filled in error. What are the biggest errors that they're filling out? Well, 100%, the biggest errors that we see are that you do not include qualified retirement plans like a 401k, and you do not include the value of your primary home. Those are the two biggest mistakes that we see in that 25% in errors. We are over-reporting our assets, right? Do not report your qualified retirement accounts. So what is influenced in the FAFSA form? Again, I'm going to go in way more detail about this in the fall. But the influencers are your income, tax returns, the number of students that you have in college, and the students' assets and income. For sure, your kids are working. $7,000 of their income is protected, so you don't need to worry about that. It is not involved in the FAFSA. But if they're making more than about $7,000, that will get assessed. Now, kids' assessment is different than how parents' income gets assessed, right? So there are some differences in how the FAFSA considers assets and income for parents and for students. So let's talk a little bit about that so we understand what exactly am I saying. So the students can have a job, right? My kids do. Both of them had lawn mowing jobs. The other one worked at our like a Lifetime Fitness, right? Their income is assessed higher, right? It's at about 50% for students' income. Their assets, if they have large bank accounts, can be assessed at 20%. Now, parents' assets are assessed far less. Parents' bank accounts, parents' brokerage accounts, parents' 529 savings plans, okay? That is only assessed at 5.64%. So if you have a 529 plan, that is assessed at the parent's rate, not at the student's rate. So that's good news, right? The final cautionary tale on this is that sometimes you've got students' bank accounts that are going to be assessed a little bit higher. I don't know if you want to take the energy to go ahead and close out an account just for the purposes of FAFSA, right? We don't necessarily recommend that at College Inside Track. One tip, though, is those 529 plans that you have. If those 529 plans are in grandma and grandpa's names, they're not going to be assessed at all as of this year. So there's lots of opportunities to talk to your financial advisor about smart ways to invest for college. So I'm going to stop here. We get a lot of questions on the FAFSA. So I really want to take the opportunity to offer the time. And Sonia, if there's really specific questions, we're going to give that opportunity for those families to just meet with me for a free hour of personalized consultation help.
Yes, Heidi, could you just recap again, what is like homes and qualified accounts are not on the FAFSA, but 529s are. Can you just recap that scope? Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so there's two ways to go about this. And I get it, it is kind of confusing. So the government does not look at your qualified retirement accounts as parents. So if you have a 401k, if you have a life insurance policy, cash value, it does not consider that. If you have primary home, you do not need to put the value of your primary home in that. If you have a SEP, a 403B for teachers, you do not put that for assets on the FAFSA. However, if you have a vacation home or rental property, you do have to put that on the FAFSA, right? So there is a differentiator about what you do put on and what you don't put on. Primary home, it doesn't go on there. It is true that a 529 is a wonderful savings vehicle. And many of us have taken advantage of this because there is a ton of benefit to not getting taxed on the gains, right? That's the whole benefit. And in the state of Illinois, if you're using Illinois Bright Start, we actually get a state income tax benefit merely from using that Illinois Bright Start, right? There's some limits to that. And again, I can answer some questions about that, but 529s are assessed, but they are not assessed too high. It's just 5.64%. And that is part of the FAFSA form. They'll ask for that information, and you have to put that in when you're filling it out.
Okay, and one other question was regarding what year you're using your income from. So when you fill out the FAFSA in the fall, which year tax forms are you using?
That is a good question. I don't know if it's easy to think about it this way, but it is the prior year. So you're going to, it's like the last tax year that you have completed, right? So in the fall, when we're filling out the FAFSA, It's 2023. So you're going to use the last completed tax form for that year. And that there's a million other ways to say it. I just think that's the most simple way to think about it. On the FAFSA, you're entering the last completed tax year that you have done. Now, if you have not done them, or there are reasons behind you have an extension, those are unique questions, and I can meet with you and answer those questions. But for the rest of us who don't have those unique circumstances, it's just the last completed tax year.
Okay, thank you, Heidi.
Awesome. Okay, keep the questions coming. That's great. Merit aid. Here's a way that you can actually move the needle on what college you're going to have to pay for school. Because at the end of the day, if we're making between 20, it's about, we phase out of need-based somewhere between 235,000 AGI and 270, depending on the school. If you're going to be a high-cost school like Northwestern, you might find yourself need-based at Northwestern. You won't find yourself need-based very often at U of I, right? Because it's only 35,000, right? So the way the FAFSA form works is that they just unlock more need. However, the opportunity to find schools that are going to give out merit money is where I want to spend a ton of time today, because this is probably one of the top 3 questions that everybody asks is scholarships, right? So this is what we're going to talk about today. Even if you make $1 million, we understand that you don't want to overpay for school, right? That's just being strategic. That's what the whole thing is about tonight. So we're going to talk about where to find good scholarships. And I think I'm not going to do this in a poll. It's kind of like a long answer, but from a return on investment, where should I tell you guys to look for schools? Ways to find scholarships, right? Is it online Google search? Is it through the federal government? Is it by finding colleges that give out scholarships through the application and acceptance process? Or lastly, is it through local community groups like the Rotary, a church, a bank, or maybe your employer? My son got one from my husband's employer. It was very much appreciated. So let's talk about return of investment, right? First thing, it's 100% by far purposeful applications trying to find schools that give out scholarships and are giving out scholarships for the amazing things that your children have done in high school is by far the best way to move the needle on cost for college and access more merit base, right? Because the schools will give you out money, and they typically don't give out money just in 1 year, like Dayton. They're going to give you out that $4,400, not just once, but they give it to you for 4 years, because typically they are renewable scholarships. That is a term you should know. Renewable scholarships, meaning it's not just 1 year and then they're over, right? Building a right fit college list based on who gives out money and why. It could be that a school is out of state and they want a kid from Illinois. We hear this all the time with Alabama, right? And for sure, Alabama is still giving, and Alabama is a great school we went and visited. I was so surprised at how much we loved Alabama. They do a great job of giving kids from Illinois money. Why? Because Illinois kids tend to stay in state or our border states. Remember, I said that 70% of us, right? So often you are just desirable if you go to another state. So 100% for sure, look at schools that will give your student money, because you know what? Not every school will. And we're going to talk about that later. Who's giving out merit money? And it's based on selectivity rate of the school's admissions. And I'll tell you how to figure that out. Now, another way to find awesome scholarships is through the colleges when they accept your student. We're hearing a lot about this right now. Colleges give out money and opportunities for more scholarships when you get admitted, right? So your kids are waiting to hear that admissions information, right? Congrats, you're going to open up this envelope. It comes in the mail. Everybody's got their phones out, right? It's so fun. Often they're hearing that they're accepted later than when they actually could have been informed, because that comes in email. Kids miss this all the time. So a tip, please have your kids monitor their emails way more than they're used to, right? They're used to checking social media a ton, but they're not used to their emails. They need to be checking those emails all the time, weekly, during the application season, for sure. Get a habit of that. Because in their acceptance, there will also be an opportunity to look for institutional giving opportunities through the schools. Maybe it's the business school, the nursing school, the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. They have links for scholarships. So please keep that in the back of your mind. The schools themselves, after you've been accepted, will be a great way to look for institutional scholarships. Local scholarships are great. As I said, my son got a scholarship through my husband's job. Rotary, that's a good one for sure. The Rotary does a wonderful job. I work very closely with the Rotary. But typically they're one-time scholarships, so they're not renewable. It's really also important for you to understand that not all colleges allow for outside stackable scholarships, right? So there are all sorts of ways that you can be strategic about this. Just please understand that's a $500, maybe $1,000. If you're lucky, it's $2,000 for once. If Clemson costs $55,000 times 4, that is not the best way to look for scholarships, as it is a school that is actually giving you multi-year scholarships. If there's another takeaway, like top 10 takeaways for tonight, right? Flexibly priced schools. Also understand that Google searching scholarships, you have to apply on average to between 50 and 80 of these just to win a $500 award. So I tell you what, skip the fighting of applying over the online Google searches and just have your student get a job at Chick-fil-A, right? It's a far better way for you guys to spend your time. So I told you I was going to talk about looking for schools. What are the schools? How do we find schools that are going to give us impactful scholarship dollars? Well, the first thing is you've got to find schools that are giving out merit-based at all, because a whole bunch of schools don't. They don't need to. I called somebody from U of I today to talk about their scholarships. Typically, University of Illinois gives fewer than 10% of their admitted students a scholarship, fewer than 10%, right? So the rest of the 90% of everybody that's applying and getting into U of I, not getting merit-based scholarships. Why? Because they have a line out the door going to U of I. Clemson, Notre Dame, Boulder, Northwestern. Statistics on Northwestern is fewer than 7% are getting a merit scholarship at Northwestern, and the average award for that is $5,000, right? So the best way for you to do this is to figure out who is giving merit-based assistance. And if their selectivity rate is less than a 15%, that college does not need to give out merit-based assistance. But for those schools that are not that highly selective, here is why they are giving out merit-based assistance. Grades, test scores, extracurriculars. Those are the things that matter. If your grades are high enough to be considered in the top 25% of the last year's class, you will be a candidate for merit money. If your test score is equal to what was getting admitted last year, like the top 50%, for sure, merit money. And we see this play out in small liberal arts and medium-sized schools all the time. They're giving very impactful scholarships for your grades, your test scores, and extracurriculars, right? And this new thing about being demographically interesting, for sure, the opportunity to show that you're interested in maybe leaving the Midwestern area. Colleges love to be diverse. And the idea that they have a student from every state in the United States and maybe international kids, right? That matters to them to be demographically diverse. Those are absolutely ways to get impactful scholarships. So we worked with over 260 kids in our program last year. Those kids earned over $23 million worth of scholarships when we worked with them. So we see a ton of financial award letters at the end of the day. And when we review them, this is how people are getting line by line items, money to go to those schools. Schools entice our kids, right? And sometimes they can even double down and give our kids more depending on the process of the application cycle. Demonstrated interest is very new. I had no idea what this was. I've got a child who's a junior and another child who's a sophomore in college. The idea that you are showing that college that extra level that you really want to go there, you took the time to visit. You took the time on a webinar. Potentially you are engaging with them on social media. In the world of data analytics, that matters to the college. Why? Because they don't want to offer an admission opportunity to your child if your child is really, at the end of the day, not interested. So they weigh this. They weigh whether or not your child has visited, toured, interacted. That's demonstrated interest. This college here is giving money for being out of state. I can tell you 100% my son received money, and many students that we work with received money just for living out of state. A's on the transcript matter, rigorous classes. How do you figure out the rigorous classes, right? Well, APs, the IB classes, some of those up extra level in Illinois, we take a lot of AP classes. You'll find that coming in on your award letters. Letters of recommendation, another tip. This is really important if you have a junior on. Stick with that letter of recommendation. Ask for that as a junior. Do not wait as a senior. Quite often the high school teachers don't have the time to do them. Ask just earlier in the process. This school right here, it matters. They are still considering the test ACT score. FAFSA, if you fill it out, CSS profile, a little bit of extra money. And in the test optional landscape, we are definitely seeing secondary factors like the essay and opportunity for extra money, but really also for the admissions people to understand who your child is. So not a perfunctory essay, right? Something that they've worked on, definitely impactful money. We are going to talk about the ACT, but Sonia, do we have any other questions that came in on the merit aid and the scholarships?
Not at this time, Heidi. Thank you.
Okay. I'm happy to answer those if they come up, you guys. ACT is definitely still in flux, for sure, right? So I'd like to think of this as it is it's really the ballpark for you, right? Think about this as you guys can make this determination for your child. Does the test, are they testing at the same rate and at the same level as their GPA? Is there a goal score in mind? Kelley School of Business, if you get a 30 on the ACT, you get direct admit into their School of Business, right? That's a goal score. So it could matter, right? But 100%, this policy is in flux still. Purdue University went back to requiring, of the Big Ten schools, Purdue University went back to requiring the ACT or the SAT for next year's class, right? So the ones that are going to do the admissions in the fall. The rest of the Big Ten universities have not really said. Florida requires it. Texas doesn't. It clearly shows that at some of the Ivies, it helps. Notre Dame, there's definitely an uptick if you can show your ACT. But again, talked to University of Illinois today. Somebody in that we were working with in computer science decided that they were going to lean in on their activities, lean in on their grades, lean in on their leadership, and they got admitted to the University of Illinois computer science program, going test optional. So for sure, that's still an option. It's just whether or not you're going to use it. It might be school by school, and it could be factors of majors. So we want this to be an option for you, right? Is there a benefit maybe to doing some prep around the ACT? There might be, for sure. Learning how to take a timed test is pretty important in life. Getting over text anxiety can be important in life, right? Do you need to take the test 4 times? No, you typically get the score that you need about 2 or 3 times, right? So use that as a launching point for discussions within your family. What is a good score, right? How do you decide if you're going to even submit this ACT to the college? And I would say it depends, which is a horrible answer. I know that is really, really frustrating. But it really can be granular, college to college and major to major, right? It may give you a bump up into some of these schools. It may actually unlock more merit money at some schools. So I don't want it to be a throwaway opportunity. It also can show us opportunities for some foundational learning gaps. A little bit of prep, a little bit of studying could kind of help. But this is how you determine whether or not you're going to submit it, right? What is a good score? If you're getting the mid 50% for the school that you are applying to and the major that you are applying to, because this can be very skewed, especially at a school like Indiana, right? The whole school doesn't need a 30, but Kelley School of Business needs a score of 30. Sonia, do we have any testing questions, SAT, ACT?
Yes, could you go a bit into detail and explain again test optional versus test blind?
Good question. I didn't even mention test blind. Sorry. Test blind is where you don't even have the opportunity to submit a test score. All the UCCs, all the UC schools, University of California schools, they are test blind. There's not a place for you to put 22, 28 down, right? So that's test blind. You have to lean into admissions at UCLA, 152,000 people, the size of Naperville. Every people applied to the University of Los Angeles, UCLA, right? Test blind. How are they even selecting people out of that large numbers? Well, you have to lean into things like leadership, extracurriculars, AP classes, grades. Those are the things that are a factor for test blind. Test optional just means that it's your option. You know, if the test score does not reflect who your student is, lean into the GPA. But if you can do a little work and get a bump up, it might be a great opportunity.
Okay, and one other question is when your student takes either the ACT or SAT, do their scores automatically, the tests go to the school, or do they need to choose to send their scores? How does that process work?
That's a good
And they
question.
choose not to include.
Yeah, so it doesn't automatically go to the colleges unless you filled that out when you were paying and signing up for the ACT or the SAT. We actually recommend don't doing that. It is better for it to be low stakes testing, just information gathering for you and your child. And then if you choose to submit those test scores, you can do so afterwards.
Okay, thank you. We're all caught up.
So I'm not going to spend too much time with this because we're going to go over this heavily in the fall. Please understand that the FAFSA is being massively, massively, massively changed this year. The biggest thing that we're seeing, some of the nomenclature, the EFC is changing to the student aid index, right? But the thing that is worrying families is, as of this fall, we're expecting this FAFSA form to be delayed. Usually it comes out October 1st. The FAFSA changes are not ready to be fully implemented. The form is not ready, so it's going to be delayed. Please understand, I don't have all that information. We have a wonderful, wonderful family newsletter from College Inside Track. It gives out tons of tips and opportunities for more free webinars like this. But we are going to let you guys know when the FAFSA is going to be fully ready for the government to hand out. It will not be October 1st this year. We do not know when it is going to be. But we should know in the next couple of months. You would find out first if you'll get this at the webinar, or the family newsletter comes out once a month. We will explain some of these changes a little bit better. The number of students that we typically are used to getting a discount if we have more than one child in college. That question in the simplification has no longer it is decoupled from the output of that FAFSA, right? So it used to be that we got to share the FAFSA, but no longer, as of this year, we're not getting to share it. So the discount for more than one child is going away. Now, again, I know that you may have questions, and I'm happy to do that. Reach out to Sonia and I can talk about your own family circumstances. Divorce family is another one that people have a lot of questions over. The change is going to be, what used to be that we took the income from the parent where the child lived the majority of time. That is moving to the parent who provides more material support. The Department of Education is lacking in their details. We have not fully defined what is more material support. So please stay tuned. There are going to be some more information about some of the specifics on more changes for this. If you have a small business, it used to be that you did not have to report your assets if it was less than 100. They are removing that designator. It is no longer going to be in part of this picture. So a bunch of tips here. Understand that there really is a changing landscape. So much is changing year to year because of COVID, right? So many people are applying to so many more schools. Understand that you have options. You can go test optional. You can apply. If you're not a great test taker, you don't have to submit it. You just have to think about it from your family's perspective and understand the acceptance rates and how to lean into the amazing things and potentially not submit the test score. Personally, I still think taking the test is not a bad thing, right? But I mean, for some people, I just don't want people to be taking 5 of them just to get a goal score. Visit these schools. That's the best way to figure out fit for your family and your child, right? Do they love it? Do they want to live there for 4 years? Ask those students questions that you're getting as tour guides. It's really helpful. Sign up for those tours early. They fill up. It's a weekend that everybody has off. You cannot make that tour 5 days ahead of time, month in advance, please. When you are thinking about where you're getting into school, those secondary factors really will play a role. Lean into things that are unique. Leadership, so important. Please have a strategy that starts earlier than the end of your senior year, and have that conversation with your student. If you have guidelines or boundaries, side rails of what you want to pay for school, that is okay. Think about what your ultimate goal is for schools, and then have a 4-year plan, right? It's very difficult to cash flow $60,000. So you may have a gap in what you have saved and what college costs. That's fine. That's the whole reason for that FAFSA form and that federal student loan, taking that first. Understand that it might be that a student needs to have a little bit of ownership in the process. That student loan is the only one that your student can take on their own without a parent signature. So attack this like a business decision that it really is. Find schools. You might have a child that has learning differences, ADHD. What do they need from a school? That is super important. Maybe a smaller school will fit them a little bit better. So a little bit about College Inside Track. We do something like a realtor would do, helping you find the right fit. Buying a house is a major, major purchase, right? So sometimes it helps to have an expert help you through that process. That is the reason why somebody would also choose guidance, because we are talking about those kind of numbers. College is the second most expensive purchase that most families will make in their lives, right? So finding help and what is that big purchase is really just smart strategy. And when we help families, we help in 3 key ways. We help you navigate the process and find the right fit school, right fit being academic, social, and financial. And when we work with families, that transfer rate goes from 38% down to 4%. All the schools that are on your list will make sure there's an opportunity to get the best price. Sometimes there's an opportunity to appeal, and sometimes there is not. But one thing that I love is we get to be a neutral third party. I can't tell you the amount of eyeball rolls that I got from my kids over, I have this, mom, we're good, right? I was never the smartest person in the room. So at College Inside Track, we get to help be that project manager and that expert opinion. So a little bit of housekeeping. I talked to you about the family newsletter that we do. Sonia is going to be giving you the opportunity to take advantage of some of these bonus content that we do. One of the coolest things that I get to do is I get to do a free family consultation. I'll talk to you. This is great information, but there is a ton of it, and I may not have covered something that you guys need as a family. Right? So if you have questions, please use this free resource, right? Happy to talk about that and meet with you for an hour. We go over your questions. I'll go over a timeline, what to do, when to do it. Really great strategies. So I want to make sure that I try to end on time. Sonia, do we have any questions here at the end?
Yes, Heidi, could you talk a little bit about trust accounts? Are they assessed the same as parent accounts?
It depends on how the trust is written. Typically, that would be something that you would have to go back to the attorney. There are ways for the trust where it is, if it's specifically for the beneficiary of the child, you have to include it. But I don't want to answer that broadly because there can be exceptions to that. So probably whoever wrote the trust document has granular information about that. You could ask them and then circle back to me, and I can help you with that question for the FAFSA. I'm happy to answer all sorts of FAFSA questions.
Okay. And then this is kind of combined together is how many colleges or universities should your students apply to? And kind of along the same line is how many schools are needed to create sufficient options for schools?
Okay, this is a very, very good question. We really feel like it is best practice to still only apply to about 10 schools. I can't even tell you how much time the essays take. Many, many, many colleges have supplemental essays. Why me? Why the school? Why this major? That's 250 words for different schools, different majors. It takes a lot of time for many of the schools for the kids to put their best foot forward. So please do not apply to schools like spaghetti on a wall, right? We would love people to be more intentional about this, right? So 10 schools, maybe 12. Other than that, you're really going to find that your child will lose steam and potentially not do their best work.
Okay. And one last question is regarding the FAFSA. What time of year do you fill that out? Is it in your student's senior year? And do you fill it out only once or multiple times?
Good question. Good question. Senior year is the first time you fill it out. Typically, it is going to be October 1st. It is important to fill that form out every year because it gives you access to that student loan. So we consider that to be the best practice. You do not have to disperse and choose the money. You don't. It's an opportunity for you to get it, however. So the first time you fill it out is senior year in high school. And then you're going to fill it out usually in October every subsequent year. Good question.
Okay, thank you, Heidi.
Awesome. So I'm going to stop sharing. I want to say thank you so much to Amanda and the Downers Grove Library. This is the opportunity I've had, a couple times now to come and educate you guys, answer your questions. And I really appreciate our community libraries, right? I'm here in Wheaton. My kids went to Glenbard West. We have great resources. Please, Amanda has free resources for you. She does probably a free ACT or an SAT. You can sit down there on a weekend and see how your kids will do. Lots of information. Somebody was asking us, Amanda, somebody was asking us about Excel spreadsheets.
Yes.
Amanda was going to put that in the chat. We found 2 really great Excel spreadsheets that you can use for the offers on kind of keeping track of everything. And she's putting in that right now. Okay, so I don't know if I want to thank you again for coming on. College Inside Track really appreciates the opportunity. I'm Heidi King. It's really great. Hopefully we'll see you again in September for the FAFSA webinar. Okay, guys, I appreciate it. Have a good night.